Hey there, folks. Zane from the Infinite Jukebox, aka the #1 Death Angel fan, here with another episode of the Rapid Record Recap. What is the Rapid Record Recap? Who are you? How do I work this? Where is that large automobile? Mostly questions that I cannot answer, including who I am, because I just haven't really found myself. What am I doing, man? But I certainly can tell you what the Rapid Record Recap is. A Rapid Record Recap, it's a monthly series I do on this channel where I talk about all of the new releases I heard in a given month that I didn't get a chance to cover on the channel for one reason or another. I still had thoughts on to varying degrees. Maybe it's because I didn't hear it until it was too late. Maybe it's because I ran out of time and I wanted to review other stuff first before I actually got to it. Maybe it's because of some third reason. Maybe it was just because I was really sad at the time. It's impossible to know with me. The internet machinations of my mind are an enigma, so get out of here. I don't have to tell you. But yeah, I just talk about the new releases that I didn't already talk about in a given month, and it's April of 2024 now, so yeah, March. So without further ado, here is the March 2024 edition of the Rapid Record Recap. ScHoolboy Q, Blue Lips. The latest album from rapper ScHoolboy Q, after the fairly mixed reception kind of record Crash Talk, an album that even he admits isn't necessarily as strong as it potentially could have been, and this one is a major step up overall, and arguably a return to form, even though it is pretty arguably a very unique sound and style, even by his pretty esoteric standards in terms of flow and delivery. I mean, his flows on this record are all over the place, from the more aggressive and triumphant moments to the more laid-back and cool cuts. A lot of the instrumentals here have this pretty unique, odd sort of feel to them that kind of borders on abstract, with some tracks like Love Birds, for example. And the features are all pretty solid too. The songwriting is equally so, and the record admittedly ends off a bit abruptly with the brief smile, but I think as a whole, still a good album, and it's nice to see ScHoolboy Q back doing quality stuff. Do I think this is one of the best rap albums we've gotten this year so far, like many people were saying after this first dropped at the beginning of March? No, not really. I think that that's overhyping it just a little bit. It's a flawed album for sure, but still, it's a very strong record, and it demonstrates that ScHoolboy Q is still in his prime, still doing his thing. Maybe he's not in his commercial prime anymore, but he's still killing it on his own as a rapper. And it's, again, like I said, just nice to see him back in proper form. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Pissed Jeans, Half Divorced. Despite having one of the funniest names in the entirety of heavy music at large, and if you don't think so, then you are a dork and a square, I will say that Pissed Jeans do have their highs and lows, and I'm willing to consider this record, somewhat of a high. Half Divorced is roughly 30 minutes of pure noise rock and noise punk that radiates the exact level of self-aware energy that you would expect from the band at this point, and some of the highlights here are some of their best songs in a while. Tracks like Stolen Catalytic Converter, as well as Everywhere is Bad, both of, like I said, some of the best songs they've put out in recent memory, the latter of which kind of reminds me of TV Party by Black Flag to an extent, with the way that the backing vocals shout out random places, and then frontman Matt Corvette explains why each of them are, well, bad as you would expect. But yeah, just super energetic, often very fun record that feels like Piss Jeans just kind of fucking around, and I like it because of that. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Look, I'm gonna hate sounding like Ben Shapiro as much as the next normal person when I say this band's name in this video, but I think I can only swear like so many times before YouTube actually has a problem with it. So, Mannequin P word, I Got Heaven. You know when you meet a ton of people passionate about some band with a cult following that's just getting bigger and bigger with each passing release, and then you check them out and you kind of like it, but also like you just don't really get the hype at the same time? That's me with this band, and also Pavement, but more importantly, this band. I will say the addition of guitarist Maxine Steen definitely does provide some fresh blood here, for lack of a better term. This record does sound very lively overall, and I think some of the more hardcore-oriented tracks, like Okay, 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 and the title track, are some of the better songs, while some of the more traditional indie rock and melodic tracks don't really grab me as much, feel fairly forgettable, maybe just a bit too loose for my personal liking, and the album closer Split Me doesn't really grab me in any way whatsoever. But that being said, the songwriting throughout the record, pretty solid too, so there's that. I enjoy this record, to a fair extent anyway, and it's like barely 30 minutes, so what am I gonna do, complain that my time was wasted or anything? I barely get anything done in my regular day-to-day life in 30 minutes. Well, what am I gonna do? It's an alright album. I don't hate it. It's pretty solid. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. Everything, Everything, Mountainhead. The melodies and relatively decent production are basically the only thing this record has going for it in my eyes. I mean, the keys and synths sound fine, I guess, if not a little cheesy at times, but as a whole, I think instrumentally this record is just kind of dull tonally, despite obviously trying to be pretty colorful, and the record definitely overstays its welcome too. It's a bloated album, but then again, if this record was 35 minutes long, I'd still probably be calling it bloated because there's no real major highlights here for me. And frontman Jonathan Higgs has this Chris Martin kind of vocal delivery style where I think he's trying to be whimsical in some way, and I just don't like that at all. And his voice on tracks like Don't Ask Me to Beg is just not feeling it. His rapid fire vocals on the track The Mad Stone especially annoy me. I just really don't like that song in particular. It honestly may be my least favorite Everything song that I've heard to date, and that's saying something because while I do like this band, they do have a couple of weaker projects here or there, and as a whole, their last studio album, Raw Day to Feel, was a pretty solid outing, and I think as a whole, it was pretty interesting, way more engaging than this, way more creative than this. This just feels bland. This just feels extremely, extremely bland. I'm going to give this record 2 stars out of 5. Turnabout, Obscura Noctis Mors. I'll be completely real, I'm not a haunted mounder, if you will. Is that what people call the Haunted Mound fan base? I mean, Drain Gang fans are called like Drainers or whatever, right? I'm just gonna go with it. I haven't really clicked with Turnabout or the rest of the Haunted Mound Collective in the past, but I still think this is a solid little EP that I actually liked way more than I expected. I mean, I'll be honest, the screams don't really work for me, although they do convey a lot of the emotional pain and suffering of the EP decently well. And I think that the density of the production can be maybe a bit too much at times, but even still, Gonnerville is a phenomenal producer and the main member of the Haunted Mound Collective that I personally enjoy paying attention to. I think he really kills it in a lot of ways as a producer across various different projects. But I digress. I think the wall of sound vibe here is maybe just a bit too much at times, at least as far as trying to represent the mental anguish here goes. But still, I like Better Off Alone in particular. I think that track has a really great melody to it. And as a whole, I think that this is a very earnest, very enjoyable EP, even if I don't think that I would enjoy it as much if it was, stretched out to a full-length project. But as it stands, 4 tracks, it's pleasant. I like it. Maybe this is my Haunted Mound arc. I mean, I think Cemetery just dropped a new album, so I guess we'll wait and see when I eventually get around to reviewing that. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. Faye Webster, Underdressed at the Symphony. While I do like some of Faye's material in the past, I don't really get why she's right now becoming as hyped up as she is, because Underdressed at the Symphony is easily her worst studio album to date. I really just think that this is a pretty terrible record overall. There's a lot of really grating moments here. The overdone auto-tune on the track Feeling Good Today. There's also the album opener Thinking About You's last half, where she's just repeating the phrase thinking about you with the same riff ad nauseum, which is like, please, I'm begging you, stop thinking about me. I don't want you to think about me anymore. Please, no more thinking. In fact, I would say repetition is actually a huge issue with this record. Tracks like the album closer and He Loves Me, yeah, I just kind of feel like they don't really have a lot going for them, and then they just repeat their choruses until my brain melts, and not in like a good, oh man, this rules brain melt kind of way, but more in like a I'm listening to the musical equivalent of C-SPAN kind of way, and that's just never good. This is just a huge step down from her previous works. I mean, yeah, those records still did have their issues with finding a unique creative identity, but they're still performed and often written well, whereas I feel like this just has nothing going for it at all. And I wanted to do a full-length review on this because I do think this may end up being in my top 20 worst albums of the year list at the end of the year. That's a very real possibility. But then I tried to sit down and write a proper review for this, and I know that, like, blah 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 something something, all good reviewers can write a review about anything within the realm of media they write about or whatever. I couldn't write one for this. It was just so dry that I'm just shoving it into a corner here in the Rapid Record recap. Maybe I'll do a full-length review on it if it does end up in my top 20 worst, just for the sake of having that video out there. But as it stands, nah, this album's just not for me. I'll say that. I'm going to give this record 1.5 stars out of 5. Raz Fresco and Cookin Soul, Bakin Soul. Last month, when Cookin Soul collaborated with the god Fahim, I said that I hoped that we would get more Cookin Soul rapper collaborations in the future, and I mean, I guess my wish came true, because here we are, and Raz Fresco sounds decent enough here. I mean, the guy has personality for sure, even if there are a few times where it's kind of like he's trying to demonstrate technicality and syllabic gymnastics, if you will, more than anything of value, though I would say that those passages are evened out by more well-written songs like No Cap, even if there are some corny bars throughout, like on the track Receipt, where, like a receipt, he comes after the loot, is one of the most important lines on that track, which is... I'm just not going to comment on that. Cookin Soul production on here, though, solid stuff. Very jazzy, still immediate, still punchy, has some strong samples throughout, too, so yeah. I do think that this is a step down from Cookin Soul's previous collaboration with a rapper, and I won't comment a ton on the same for Raz Fresco since I'm less familiarized with his body of work. But as it stands, I still like this one a fair bit. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. Gene Dawson, Boohoo. Very, very good EP from Gene Dawson here, with some nice, lush instrumentals, great vocal performances, strong songwriting as well. I love how grand this can often feel stylistically, despite only being 3 songs, and the opening track, New Age Crisis, is definitely one of the best songs that any EP has produced so far in 2024. I mean, that's not really saying a lot because we're only a quarter of the way into the year, but still, great track, and I want to make that a point in particular. I don't really have a ton to say about this EP, but go give it a shot if you're interested in artsy pop and R&B with a heavy dose of experimentation that nonetheless doesn't sacrifice any of the melodics that you may want from either of those genres. I'm going to give this EP 3.5 stars out of 5. Bleachers, self-titled. I've seen some praise be thrown around for a few tracks here, like Tiny Moves, but I just don't see it personally. This is just some of the most tepid wannabe Bruce Springsteen heartland rock music for a generation that doesn't have, and honestly doesn't really need, any sort of youth culture troubadour like some previous generations have, and I can say that as a member of roughly said generation. I mean, I know that Jack Antonoff is like 40, he's by definition middle-aged. It just feels like Bleachers consistently make music for like 18, 19-year-olds, so actually in my age group, that feel like they're maybe born in the wrong generation, or like they only listen to indie music because all the stuff in the mainstream sucks, when all of the indie bands they listen to have like 5 to 10 million monthly Spotify listeners, those kind of groups. And I don't get this one. I just don't get it. I don't get this band at that. The sax throughout the record feels overdone and extremely cheesy. The songwriting on songs like Self-Respect doesn't really tug at my heartstrings in the way that I'm assuming was intended. And on songs like The Waiter and We're Gonna Know Each Other Forever, it's just rough. And I think that the auto-tune on those songs in particular is not great. those prior two tracks that I just mentioned, it just sounds so bad. I'm kind of impressed by how unmemorable this album is. This feels less like the E Street Band and more like a series of John Mellencamp deep cuts if Mellencamp made music for millennials whose favorite show is The Office, and that's probably the worst, most hurtful thing that I could possibly say about this album. In all honesty, though, there's a fair amount of material here that's bad, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, I just think it's very mediocre and forgettable wannabe anthemic stuff that doesn't manage to achieve what it sets out to do, and it's not, like, offensively bad or anything like that. This isn't one of the worst albums I've heard all year or anything, but it is certainly one of the most flavorless and, I'll say suburban, for lack of a better description. This is one of the most suburban albums I've heard in a while, and I mean that in a bad way. More than anything, I just think that somebody needs to tell Jack Antonoff that referencing Tom Waits on Alma Mater does not make him as good as Tom Waits or really any singer-songwriter for that matter. I mean, this guy could barely write as well as the Ramones. Now that I think about it, I do feel more engaged with the storytelling, and now I want to sniff some glue than I do anything here, so point to Joey and the gang, I guess. I'm rambling now, but yeah, this album's just... it's whatever. I'm going to give this record 2.5 stars out of 5. Ariana Grande, Eternal Sunshine. Latest from pop megastar Ariana Grande, though I will say this one feels significantly less hyped up than her last couple of records, but I can kind of see why, as this is easily the most personal that Ariana has ever directly gotten in her music. I mean, that's not to say she hasn't written songs about personal experiences in the past. Some of her biggest songs have been about personal experiences, but I don't think she's ever been as direct and to the point about certain things relating to heartbreak and general emotional states than she is here on Eternal Sunshine, which I actually kind of like to see from her. I mean, when she's talking about things like, say, the difficulties of situationships, it feels like it's coming from a very earnest, vulnerable place from her, and in a world where there's Billboard chart-topping superstar musicians who feel more impersonable than ever before, though that kind of figure has never really felt personable in the history of music, it's kind of nice to hear someone like Ariana take a step back and just lay out her feelings on the table. I mean, sure, is this still a multi-bajillion-dollar production? Yeah, absolutely, that goes without saying, but I think as a whole, this feels significantly more honest than what most of her peers could ever dream of putting out. Not saying this album's great, I don't even think that this is better than her past couple of records, if I'm being honest, but still, good album. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Young Lean and Blade, Psykos. Sold Out is fine, I guess. I'm going to give this record 2.5 stars out of 5. There's just nothing here for me. Chief Keef and Mike Will made it. Dirty Nachos. New mixtape here from Chief Keef, and the Chief, he's sounding pretty solid here. I like how lively he sounds on a lot of tracks. Love Don't Live here especially. I feel like a lot of Mike Will Made It's producer tags here are maybe a bit old at this point, like the whole, damn son, where'd you find this, and Trapaholics. Like, I know that they're iconic and, like, shitpost material in the best way, but I don't know, I feel like it's a little old at this point. I'm not saying he has to switch up his producer tag or anything, I just kind of wish that he'd maybe do something slightly different or maybe more subtle. But yeah, Chief Keef sounds good here, and also 2 Chainz of all people pops in to do a really strong verse on Pull Up Ghost Clan that I like a lot, easily one of the best tracks on the record, so as a whole, pretty solid mixtape. We're never gonna get Almighty So Too, are we? I'm going to give this mixtape 3 stars out of 5. Flo Milli, Fine Ho, Stay. I'm really feeling this enemies to lovers arc that we've gotten from Flo Milli, from Why Is You Here Ho to You Still Here Ho to Fine Ho Stay. I mean, it really makes you it really makes you feel like the hoe, you know what I'm saying? Not that I need Flo Milli for myself to feel like a hoe. I can do that completely on my own, thank you, but, still. The more energetic and rap-based tracks here are easily some of the better moments. I feel that Flo Milli is actually somewhat underrated in terms of the pure energy she can bring to the table at times. And the trap soul thing that she's kind of got going on here, it's been done 1,000 times better by plenty of other artists, but for what it's worth, she pulls it off well on tracks like Lay Up and Never Lose Me. Plus, this is only 33 minutes, so it doesn't, overstay its welcome, doesn't become stale. It's just a good mixtape, and from a pretty appropriately rated artist overall. Not considered a genius, not considered overly obnoxious, because she's not. She's just a good musician who I kind of hopes puts out something great at some point. But as it stands, still, good mixtape. I'm going to give this mixtape 3.5 stars out of 5. The Black Crowes, Happiness Bastards. While it may no longer be up by the time you're watching this, if you're watching this video in, 2067, and both YouTube and Rate Your Music are no longer around, which, I don't know how you'd be watching this if YouTube wasn't around, but I digress. If you're watching this in the future, it may not be up anymore, but when I first heard this album, there's a half-star review for this album on rateyourmusic.com where it was referred to as things like pure noise and a betrayal of the classic bluesy southern rock sound that the Black Crowes have famously always dabbled with. And I went into this album foolishly like, oh man, can't wait for the Black Crowes to enter their chat pile era. But, nope, this is, if anything, a more watered-down version of the already pretty watered-down southern bluesy rock that the Black Crowes have always made since day one. It's just very lifeless, run-of-the-mill stuff from a band that have been that way for decades, kind of always have been that way, but at least their first couple of albums were really sold based off the pure passion and energy that they were able to provide to, say, their cover of Hard to Handle, or a song like Twice as Hard. But now that they're at this point in their career, they've gone from energetic local bluesy bar band that was surprisingly good to regular local bluesy bar band that's not, and that's a pretty major step down if you weren't aware. The ballads here as well, like Wilted Rose and Kindred Friend, wish they could be half of what their better tender tracks like She Talks to Angels are, and it's just such a nothing comeback from a band that seemingly grows less relevant in discussions of 90s music every single year. Not to say that they don't have their hits, they absolutely do, that is undeniable, they have their fan base as well. But I don't know, man, when I hear discussions surrounding a lot of the sort of mainstream rock bands of the 90s outside of grunge, I just don't hear the Black Crowes brought up that much unless it's someone who's already a huge fan of the Black Crowes. I mean, there are a lot of bands out there that people aren't fans of, that it's undeniable to, acknowledge their influence, their impact, their success. The Black Crowes just aren't one of those bands. They're just kind of a nothing band, for lack of a better term. I've got nothing against them, but then again, if they keep putting out albums like this, I actually might have something against them in the future. I'm going to give this record 2.5 stars out of 5. Aborted, Vault of Horrors. This is death metal leaning more towards the metalcore side of things here, though honestly that's kind of what Aborted are more well known for at this point in their career, and I mean overall it's pretty well performed, but ultimately very forgettable stuff with no standout riffs or especially heavy passages that make this record stand out both from the competition and even from the better Aborted records out there. The couple of records they do have that I feel are worth checking out for people who aren't necessarily diehard fans of this particular brand of death metal, and the features don't really add anything here either, even when it's individuals from bands I enjoy. You've got Flesh God Apocalypse members on here, you got motherfucking Cryptopsy members on here, you've got members of bands that are genuinely really great legends in some cases, but none of them add anything to this, and they certainly don't make it really a worthwhile listen to me. I'm going to give this record 2.5 stars out of 5. Tierra Whack. Worldwide Whack. Man, she had so much potential at one point after her earlier works like Whack World showcased this very unique writer and performer, but this just isn't it at all. I mean, weak beats like the cutesy minimalistic twingle of Chanel Pit and X's extremely thin sort of march-like rhythm, some very corny and otherwise weak lines too, like on the track Misbehave, where she says she's so cool that she was born in the refrigerator. Like, come on, that's like one step away from like that 21 Savage poop bar that we had earlier this year. That's pretty rough. And before you come at me like, oh, you just don't like the fact that she's silly and quirky, there are some moments here where I feel they nearly do highlight kind of the personality of her, like the track Shower Song, which is Tierra talking about singing in the shower, which I think is a really cute, fun topic to talk about. It allows her to feel kind of down to earth and genuine in the same way that, as odd as this might sound, pre the big day, Chance the Rapper kind of did. But even then, those songs still feel way less energetic and impassioned than what you got from her earlier mixtapes and releases. As a whole, I just think that there's too much weak material here for me to say that the better moments outweigh them in any way, and even still, those better moments are very few and far between. I'm going to give this record 2 stars out of 5. Nourished by Time, Catching Chickens. Listen, I was late to Erotic Probiotic 2 last year, even though that's now a hugely beloved release and a very good record, and the fact that I never covered it on this channel sucks. And it's for that reason that I created the Rapid Record Recap, because I'm tired of missing albums like that. But hey, Catching Chickens, latest EP from Marcus Brown, aka Nourished by Time. I'm here now, Buster, and I'm talking about it, man. It's pretty good. It's very good, actually. Like a lot of EPs, it does suffer from being too short, in my opinion, and I think that Brown's full lengths up to this point have been stronger, but that being said, I still really like his vocals on this one. Songs like Romance in Me and Hell of a Ride are fantastic, as is the sort of spacious but lush production that he also provides. The songwriting here is really strong as well as songs like Had You Called being some of the most impressive material that he's put out from a songwriting perspective thus far. I think that it's not his best work overall up to this point, but I also think it's a really good EP, and I think it's one of the better EPs of the year so far, even. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Matt Champion, Mika's Laundry. Solo debut of ex-Brockhampton member Matt Champion, seeing him go into the realm of alternative pop and R&B for his first full-length solo studio album, and I gotta say, he achieves a pretty fair degree of success here. This is a really good album, and one of the better projects that we've gotten from any solo Brockhampton member so far. His voice sounds great here, and the falsetto that he achieves on tracks like Slug is an impressive demonstration of his vocal talents, while the songwriting is fairly strong throughout and leaves Champion feeling open, honest with the listener. I mean, maybe some of the songs on the back half are a bit underdeveloped. I will say I do think this album is reasonably front-loaded, but also, God, I love Aphid, that collab with Dijon. That's one of the best things that's come out of R&B and just popular music this year so far. Holy fuck, it's good. But excluding my fandom for that song in particular, this whole album is still good. It has its weaker moments, but it has its highlights too. So yeah, 3.5 stars out of 5. Gossip, Real Power. I love Beth Ditto so much as a front person. I just wish her band's music was more interesting. I mean, it's nice to see the band making a comeback and everything like that, but Real Power just kind of has some decent instrumentals and Ditto's presence as a vocalist to take this from meh to decent, because beyond that, I just feel like there's not a ton here to really sink my teeth into, but like I said, Beth Ditto has so much charisma on cuts like the title track and Give It Up for Love. It's just that not a whole lot sticks with me melodically. And as a whole, I feel like some of the more dance-like influences going on here don't really land in the way that they were totally intended to. Not really the most inspired comeback or anything like that, but as a whole, I still think it's a pretty strong record for the most part. Just don't go into it expecting anything particularly mind-blowing or even anything as good as some of their earlier releases. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. Julia Holter, Something in the Room, She Moves. You know, as a reasonably big Julia Holter fan, specifically as someone who absolutely loves Have You in My Wilderness, I was going into this record expecting to have a lot to say about it, to have a lot to talk about, etc., etc., and I liked it, and that was it. It was good. I mean, it's one of her most atmospheric records to date for sure, but I also feel like I don't really latch onto as many melodies here as much of her vocal work as I have in the past compared to some of her other records. I also feel like a lot of the songwriting here is very strong, but not as memorable as some of her other records, but still really good. That's a pretty recurring theme throughout this record. Really good, just not as good as her best material. And I mean, hey, I'll take that. It's, like I said, a very ambient record. It's very pretty. It's very lush at times. It's somewhat Kate Bush inspired in a way, with the manner in which it almost feels kind of royal and grand at certain moments, but at the same time very rooted in a natural kind of sound, not sort of synthetic or anything like that at any given moment, and I like that quite a bit. And yeah, as a whole, it's good. It's good. It's a good album. I enjoy it. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Sierra Ferrell, Trail of Flowers. This is a very neo-traditionalist country record, and I think that as a whole, Trail of Flowers is pulled off very earnestly with its, at times, classic western swing kind of vibes. Not necessarily the kind of stuff that you would have gotten from Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys or anything, but definitely the kind of sound you would have gotten from stuff influenced by that classic western swing kind of sound. And I think tracks like Dollar Bill Bar actually greatly benefit from that. It allows Ferrell to feel very unique in terms of the kind of influences that she embraces, whereas you have a lot of other major figures in country music that sort of reject bro country and pop country in favor of more singer-songwriter tendencies, cats like Zach Bryan, Jason Isbell, and Tyler Childers. It's kind of interesting to see Ferrell do something similar, but at the same time presenting those ideas in a totally different light with a completely different set of influences at times. Her vocals are pretty great on tracks like No Letter, and she has this sort of classic country drawl / whine that I personally find very endearing throughout, though I can certainly understand why some would find it to be somewhat grating, but then again, if you do find that somewhat grating, you probably don't like a lot of classic country music, which, again, completely understandable. It's nice to see her do some of the more stripped back tracks, like Rosemary, too. I think those more intimate moments are kind of a nice one-on-one bit of, like, interludes between her and the listener, and will it change the way you hear country music? No, but it's still a very good record from a pretty major artist in the genre right now, and it's nice to see her embrace some sounds that maybe other country musicians out there with her level of popularity don't quite have the guts to embrace. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Future and Metro Boomin, We Don't Trust You. Look, I'm just gonna get it out of the way. Yes, the centerpiece of this album is like that with Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick's verse on there is the best verse on the entire record. He outshines Future, all the other collaborators on here. Him not so subtly calling out Drake and J. Cole, especially Drake, is very nice to see. I think it's cool. I think it's fun. I think it's neato. It's a great verse. It's a great track. It's the best song on the album, bar none. However, I don't want to let that take away from the fact that this album is really strong and one of Future's best albums in a while. And I'm finally glad that I can say something nice about a Future album on this channel, because the few times he has dropped since I started this channel, it's mainly been some of his worst material that I've done nothing but absolutely shit on over time. So it's nice for me to be able to say, hey, I like the new Future and Metro Boomin record. I mean, a lot of the collabs here in general are really good. You got Young Metro with The Weeknd, Everyday Hustle with Rick Ross, Type Shit with Travis Scott and Playboi Carti, Cinderella, which is with just Travis Scott. And I think that those are some of the best tracks on the record, and all of the guests pull their own weight, deliver some strong verses. It's nice to hear more from Carti again, because that man's just never gonna drop a full-length studio album at this point. But even some of the songs where it's just Future and Metro Boomin, I think they do some strong work. The album opening title track, you have Slimed In, you have Magic Don Juan, you have Ain't No Love. I think that there are a lot of strong tracks here where Future proves to be able to flow over Metro Boomin instrumentals better than I personally was expecting at the time, with some pretty fun songwriting, and it's a good album. It's a good collaboration. Look, I'm resisting calling this genius or anything like that because it's not, and for some people this may be too meat and potatoes of a trap album to really grab you, but as a whole, I think that this is a really good, fun record for the most part, and I deeply enjoy it, and I'm just happy I can say something nice about Future on this channel for once. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Beyoncé, Cowboy Carter. You'd think that one of the biggest pop and R&B musicians of all time suddenly making a country and country-influenced album would be immediate material for a full-length review, and I thought so too, because I went into this going, man, this is going to be probably the most popular album of the year, probably the most popular album I'm going to review. I tend to review more alternative stuff because that's the stuff that interests me a lot of the time when I do full-length reviews, but Cowboy Carter, this is going to be a full-length one, baby. And then I listened to it and I was like, nah, not really. I mean, it's good, but it doesn't really warrant the whole full-length thing. There's a lot of good here, and I mean a lot of good, but it is bloated. That being said, I do think a lot of the best tracks here, like Texas Hold'em and Daughter, are pretty great and about as good as I would expect Beyoncé going country to be based off of the very concept, but also how the singles implied it was going to be. There are a couple weaker moments, mainly the reworkings of classic folk and country songs like Dolly Parton's Jolene and the Beatles' Blackbird, but they aren't that bad, and that has more to do with my personal disdain for cover songs more than anything else. Also, I really like the Smoke Hour interludes with Willie Nelson. I think that it's cool going through different tracks at the beginning of it, different songs from people like Sunhouse and Chuck Berry before finally getting to that Willie interlude there in the first Smoke Hour, but I'm also a sucker for radio station interludes. Go ask one of my all-time favorite albums, Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age. I really like those kind of interludes, trust me. Though I will say the one Willie interlude right before the track Just for Fun, where he's talking about, like, having a friend that puts you on to some good shit that you never expected was gonna be good, you're just grateful for it. Kinda almost feels like both him and Beyoncé trying to kinda nudge the country crowd a little bit and be like, see, I told you Beyoncé was country, instead of letting the music speak for itself, which is undeniably country music throughout the entirety of this record. And I think that that's a little corny, maybe. Not like Drake levels of corny, but just a little bit corny, I would say. Still, I think there's also a lot of cool subversions of genre tropes on here, like the track Levi's Jeans with Post Malone, that's taking overdone country imagery of blue jeans and turning it into something that is simultaneously edgier and more wholesome at various points in the song. And I think that the genre as a whole is kind of offering a lot of mediocre stuff in the mainstream at the moment due to cats like Morgan Wallen and Jason Aldean, and it's nice to see one of the most consistently impressive megastar musicians of all time put out something like this to kind of, dip her toes in the country music. I doubt that her next album, the third and last part of the sort of Carter series, is going to be any country at all, but still, it's nice to see her do this. Even if I do think that the record is bloated, I mean, an hour and 18 minutes, I could watch most of Eraserhead in that time. That's a lot. I'm going to give this record 3.5 stars out of 5. Rico Nasty and Boys Noise. Hardcore Dreams. Boy, this one's going to be underwhelming after all the thoughts I had on that Beyoncé album. I mean, look, if you are into Rico Nasty and her extremely in-your-face, raunchy style, then really the only thing for you here is probably going to be her taking up some Electroclash influences, but for what it's worth, I think that this is a pretty fun EP overall. Even if the instrumentals have been done 100 times by 100 better Electroclash bands, I still think that they are pretty well executed by the Boys Noise project here. I think Rico sounds high energy. I think she sounds very in your face here, which again is something that I know a lot of people aren't into, but I personally find endearing, I find enjoyable, I find her to be charismatic, so yeah, not a bad EP overall. Not one of the best of the year so far or anything, but definitely solid, and I'm excited to see what she does next. I'm going to give this EP 3 stars out of 5. So there you have it, folks, the Rapid Record recap for March of 2024. That was everything I heard throughout the month that I heard, and I was like, man, I don't have enough thoughts to review this, or man, I don't have enough time to review this, but I still wanted to talk about it on the channel for one reason or another. So I did. This is the outro. Really though, I know these videos get really long, so if you watched even a quarter of this video, then thank you for watching. If you watched less than a quarter of this, you're dead to me and I hate you. But if you watched about a quarter of it, then hey, thank you, I love you, and I would die for you. But yeah, with that being said, that's the end of this episode of the Rapid Record Recap. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.